right, everybody, welcome to this video. We are going to be talking about asks today, and I have a few of them that are quite old that I really need to get to because I didn't get to them last week. But first, we had something come out in the news a few days ago, which was about the streaming rights for TWD. And yeah, it's interesting, but it's also kind of exactly what we've been saying. So Netflix has renewed its deal to be able to stream all shows in the Walking Dead universe for the next 5 years. It will allow all shows to also stream on AMC Plus starting next year. Okay, so probably a month ago or more, I had people asking me to dig into this a little bit. I hadn't done that much digging. I did a little bit right after you asked me, and then I hadn't gotten back to it. But now I kind of don't have to because this kind of shores everything up. So let's talk about it here. Here's another one. The Walking Dead renewed by Netflix in 5-year, $500 million co-exclusive deal with AMC Global Media. Okay, so let's go back to why they ended the main flagship show and started to do spinoffs. It was because of the Netflix deal. Like that was the whole reason. Because back in 2010 or 2012, when the show was new, they made a deal with Netflix to stream The Walking Dead on Netflix. And back then, it was a very smart and very lucrative deal because Netflix was the only really big streaming platform back then. But of course, in the years since, most networks have created their own apps and their own platforms. And so did AMC. They created AMC Plus. But because of that deal was exclusive to Netflix, saying that Netflix had the exclusive rights. And again, that made sense when they made the deal back when the show was pretty new and Netflix was pretty new. But that now, with the way that streaming and technology has evolved, it's not really a smart deal anymore because they want to be able to show their own intellectual property, The Walking Dead, on the AMC Plus app, and they couldn't do that. So the deal with Netflix said that Netflix had the streaming rights exclusively until the show ended, and then 5 years after the show ended. So even once the show was done, Netflix retained the right to stream that show exclusively for 5 years after the show ended. So they ended The Walking Dead knowing that even after it ended, they weren't going to be able to show it on AMC Plus for another 5 years. They had to wait for that 5-year clock to run out. So they ended the flagship show, and then they were just waiting on that. But then they started doing the spinoffs because the spinoffs were new entities. They're new shows, and that old agreement with Netflix does not apply to any new show, right? So they waited for the clock to run out. And I mean, for my part, I wasn't really expecting the Netflix thing. I just wasn't looking for it. But now that it's happened, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you notice that it is a co-exclusive deal, meaning they can stream on AMC Plus, but they're still allowing Netflix to stream it. So it's a new agreement, right? It's a new contract that says that they will still allow Netflix to stream it, but now they have the right to stream on their platform as well. And that is what they wanted. So like I said, I wasn't really looking for the Netflix, aspect of it, but Netflix is still one of the biggest streaming platforms in the world, right? And I mean, they would be looking at the numbers here, which we don't have. They don't make those public, but I'm assuming that the Walking Dead universe, those shows are getting a lot of views, a lot of watches on Netflix. And that would make it just smart for AMC to continue to show it there, so that more and more people watch the show. So that's what they've done. I mean, they got exactly what they wanted. Now they can put it on AMC, but they still, retain the advantages of also having it on Netflix. So this is smart, and it makes perfect sense to me that this is what they did. Now, in terms of, remember, people were a little bit worried that they said they were shopping around streaming rights trying to sell them. I wasn't sure exactly why that was, and that was exactly what I was going to try to dig into. Like I said, I don't think I have to now because they've sold them to Netflix, but in hindsight, just knowing what I know about the business world, I think that AMC was doing that, putting it out there that they were shopping for a buyer as a bargaining tactic. Okay, that was their way of saying to Netflix, okay, do you really want this, or are we going to give it to someone else? And probably also of pushing the price to where they wanted it. So they most likely didn't have that much intention of selling it to anyone except Netflix. And honestly, $500 million, there's not very many streaming platforms that would be able to comfortably absorb that price tag. So yeah, I think that was mostly a bargaining tactic. And, now finally the agreement has been signed. Netflix, finally bit the bullet and did it. And it's probably going to be really lucrative for both sides. So yeah, this just makes perfect sense. But here's the thing. If it's been renewed for 5 years, obviously The Walking Dead is not going anywhere for at least 5 years. They will probably revisit the contract in 5 years. And that's smart too, because they're not going to get back into like lifetime streaming rights, when they know technology is changing way too fast for that. So every 5 years, they're probably going to revisit and renew the contract. But okay, a couple of things here. Not only does that show that the Walking Dead universe isn't going anywhere, but a $500 million deal, that I don't have to tell you guys, that's a lot of money, right? So they would not be having a deal that is that steep on the price tag if the show is pretty much over and is petering out and the numbers are down and nobody's watching. I mean, this is going to be based, it is a projection into the future, but it's going to be based on the numbers now, what's happening now, how big an audience they're getting, and what they already know they're going to be producing in the future. So the fact that they are talking about a reunion show, they're talking about Andy coming back to play Rick. We know that there's some Beth stuff coming up. You know what I mean? Like this should give everyone a lot of hope because if you still needed it, because they've got big things coming for the Walking Dead universe, or else this deal would not be taking place. Okay. AMC felt like they could shop the rights around because they know what they have. They know what a big deal it is. They know what's coming and what they are working on right now. And they know that it's going to make a lot of money for anybody who is contracted with them. And so that's why they were able to do this. And that's why Netflix did jump on it. It's just smart for Netflix too. So yeah, all of that to me just shows that not only is the reunion show coming, but they are thinking and projecting and believing that there's some big stuff coming up that audiences are going to like and that people are going to want to watch. And to me, I mean, of course, Rick and Daryl's reunion and the reunion show, that's a big part of it. That would, for the GA, that's going to be a big deal. But to me, it has to do with Beth, right? It's just showing that they've got some big stuff coming up. No matter what they say, they always like to say, "Oh, we had no idea," and I always call BS on that. Or Gimple going, "I don't know if it's going to happen, but we're thinking about it. We're talking about it." No, it's already happening. They're already planning on it. He's just misdirecting. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about the deal with Netflix. From a business standpoint, it's very smart. And, from a TD standpoint, it gives me lots of hope because they have big stuff coming up to be putting a deal like this in place. So it's a very positive thing. It's a very hopeful thing. And yeah, our favorite show is going to be around for a while, which is good for us, because we have fun. All right. So with all of that said, if you have any other questions, feel free to send them in. But let's hop over to the asks. Now, I will say that there were some asks down here at the bottom that I don't think I answered and that disappeared. That happens sometimes. I don't know if it's me accidentally deleting them or Tumblr just eating them, but I'm sorry if I don't remember what they were, but I remember there was a few before this. So if I don't answer your ask, then feel free to send it in, and I apologize if it got eaten. All right, so this is from a few weeks ago, but Obadiah 2 sent this to me. So Scott Gimple just posted a picture of him and the actor who plays Eastman in The Walking Dead. Apparently ran into each other on an airplane. So begs the question, where was Gimple going and why did he use that wording? Also, Emily liked the post. And this is what he says. Everything gets a return. Flight. Look who I ran into. And I mean, I agree. Scott Gimple does not post very often, very few and far between on his posts. So we always kind of look at them with a critical eye. Everything gets a return. It was a big theme back when, this episode with Eastman aired in season 6. It was, obviously Morgan was in that episode and that was something that he said a lot, but it was also a big deal in season 5. I know that they said it at the end of season 5 when Morgan ran into the wolves. And yeah, it's just very suspicious wording to say that. Eastman was bitten, so I'm assuming they're not bringing him back unless it's in flashback. So it's just, he didn't have to use that phrase, right? So yeah, I'm definitely suspicious of that. It's kind of a funny picture. But to me, this is also Gimple doing his, what do I mean? What's going on kind of look. So yeah, thank you for sending that in. That's definitely very, very interesting. Hi, I was wondering what your thoughts about this connection between DC38, Tenebra, and Slabtown. All right, let's take a look. So Michael E., I don't want to try to say his name, Satrazemus will direct 301, Trillium, which is Beth Root, 307, Hourglass, and 308. He also directed Slabtown. So we now have Hoffman and Negretti, writers from Beth's era, and the director of Slabtown. This was posted by Facebook account that seemed to have connections one day after my original post. Freaky coincidence? Definitely. So that this is just about him. We've seen his work in TWD universe many times. Dead City 2, Fear, The Ones Who Live, Tales, and the original TWD. So TD has been tracking art and its symbolism in TWD since the inclusion of and focus on the large painting by Caravaggio called The Denial of Peter, featured prominently in Slabtown 5-4. Caravaggio painted this work months before he died, and it's considered the epitome of his style. What is an element of that style called? Tenebrism. See the definition below. The writers used tenebrism as a stylistic element throughout the entire Slabtown episode, not just to highlight the painting itself. I've included a couple of pictures below, but the tenebrae style is used in multiple shots throughout the episode. To make sure we picked up on the symbolism, they included the at least TD famous close-up of Beth's sneakers with white and black shoelaces, symbolizing the contrast between light and dark. So, okay, hold on, let me read that again. Okay, sorry. I kind of spaced out while I was reading part of that. Okay. His revolutionary Baroque style, he employed tenebrism to create intense dark using stark artificial light from a concealed charcoal fire against a pitch black background to highlight the psychological tension of the scene. Slabtown could, in fact, have more accurately been called tenebrae. Matthew Negrete wrote Slabtown and is a writer on Dead City this season for episodes 2 and 4. He is also an executive producer for the season. He and Hoffman were in the writer's room when seasons 4 and 5 were written. They are intimately familiar with Beth's arc and its symbolism. The writers often use artwork symbolically in TWD, and one of the ways they point this out to us is by having it appear out of place. For example, this Caravaggio was said to have been rescued by Dr. Edwards outside the High Museum in Atlanta. However, the painting has never been housed there. Guess where it is housed? The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, setting for Dead City. Many of the works featured in Dead City Season 2 at the Met are not housed there, most notably the Goya painting, which is housed in Spain. This ties Dead City to Daryl Dixon, as Goya is the signature artist in the opening credit of Daryl Dixon 3. What could this mean for Beth's return? I've been tracking the Season 5 replay since Season 1 of Daryl Dixon. I've always thought that the replay of Slabtown would occur after Beth reappears to explain at least part of where Beth has been this whole time. Could 3-8 of Dead City be that replay? I think it could, but it could also be one of those titles with multiple meanings. In Dead City, it could mean the end of New York City's return. The lights could go out in the city as the religious meaning of the word tenebrae would indicate, but it could also include a coda or a post-credit scene that shows where Beth is, thereby connecting it to Slabtown. Okay, so yeah, I'm probably not going to read the entire thing, but I encourage everyone to read through this because it's a really good post. And as you can see, it goes on for a little bit. It ties into Italy, and a lot of people have been following, like Norman and Emily both being in Italy, which seems like a really huge coincidence. So this kind of, talks about this here. We've got the Mona Lisa painted by Da Vinci. And you guys, I'm really glad that you follow this. I always tell my fellow theorists that and I think I've said this before, that we have different fortes, right? WDA is actually an artist, like she paints and she's a visual artist, so she picks up on colors and shadows and this kind of thing really, really well. That is not my forte. The visual art is really not my forte. I can see it sometimes if I'm specifically looking for it. So if I go into an episode specifically looking for stuff that's in the background, for paintings on the wall, for sculptures, then I'll see it, like obviously if I'm looking for it. But when I'm just going through the episode, I don't always notice these things. I'm really good at, circular arcs and symbolism, and I can read symbolism as though it's written out for me in a book, but we just all have the things that we notice the most. So I'm really glad you guys are following us, because I would probably not put all of this painting stuff together with the artists and how they're linked to different places than what we're seeing them in the show. I mean, this is really brilliant stuff. So I'm really glad you guys are following this. And I in terms of, you were wondering about my thoughts. I mean, I definitely think you could be right. I think you're really onto something here. All of you are. And, I like the idea of, oh, well, I was going to say too, I like the idea of tenebrae and how that you're connecting it to Slabtown. And we'll have to watch for that more in Dead City. But you said in here specifically that that Negrete wrote 2 and 4. Well, we just saw episode 2 of Dead City, and I mentioned all of the Beth callbacks there. The giving the knife to the Dama to possibly commit suicide, and there were some, I get it, and some different dialogue callbacks, and just lots of different things, and of course the hospital. I think the hospital is, I don't want to keep mentioning it every single episode because they're obviously going to be there for most of the season. But it's a big deal that they're in a hospital and that these guys wrote Beth's hospital arc, and that was really the only other place we saw a big hospital setting. There have been medical settings in other cases, but usually they were pretty small, only in a few minutes of an episode, just not a big deal, not a huge part of the narrative. And so the fact that all of these guys are working on this season and worked on Beth's arc, and now this whole season seems to be taking place at a hospital, again, that's a big deal. Um, let's not undercut what a big deal that is, right? So, yeah, I'm excited to see what Dead City episode 8 brings us and, the whole season, what it brings us. But I mean, it makes sense. We kind of said this back when it was first leaked that Emily was on set and filming for Dead City, is like, okay, well, could this not be a foreshadow? They're showing us the AU, and they were really quiet about it for a while, but now they're finally talking about how it's an AU episode, and it's like, that way nobody's suspecting her return. But I really think that they're, even if it's not a whole episode dedicated to her return, even if it's not that big a deal, I feel like there's probably a good chance that there's going to be something I almost said season 8, in episode 8 of season 3 of Dead City that will, at the very least, hint that she actually is alive. And that just makes sense structurally. Like, they're going to do the AU episode. I imagine that it's going to be an emotional episode for Maggie. I miss my sister. I wish she was here, something like that. And then at the end, they'll give us something, just something small like, oh, maybe she really is still around. I'm feeling like that's the way it's going to go. Of course, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, this is really exciting. And so I'm really glad that everyone is keeping track of this. And thank you for sending it in. I didn't know that that's what Tenebrae was. When I first saw all of the titles, I was like, oh, I have no idea what that is. And I had to research it. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you're barking up the right tree. And yeah, we'll just keep an eye on it. We'll try to keep an eye out better for paintings and where, this style is used in Dead City as we move forward. So thank you, Book Queen Rules. That is amazing. Okay. Hi again. Hope you are doing well. So as info trickles out about Dead City Season 3, some really juicy tidbits have been happening. We know that Seth Hoffman and Matthew Negrete are main writers on the season, which is huge because they were involved heavily with the writing of TWD Seasons 4 through 6. There's been a lot of talk about Slabtown and possible connections that the episode is going to have with the upcoming season. Matthew Negrete wrote Slabtown, and now the director of some of the Season 3 Dead City episodes have been revealed. 301, 307, and 308 so pretty much this is kind of the same thing that was just said. He was the director of Slabtown in Season 5, Beth's big solo hospital episode. So we've got both the writer and the director of Slabtown heavily involved in Season 3 of Dead City. So, I mean, I don't know how this will play out in terms of the plot of Season 3, but I'm just looking at the structure here. And, we're saying that this person who, Michael, I wish I knew how to say his last name better, he may be bringing the Beth episodes to us, right? That's kind of what we're saying here. 301, 307, 308, which leaves episodes 2 through 6, right? And we just saw episode 2. And that they turned on the lights to the Statue of Liberty and they're drawing people into them. And it does look like there's going to be some conflict there. And I mean, you know what? There's always going to be conflict there. It's very similar to when, back in the main show, Rick was trying to integrate the Saviors into their community after Negan was taken down. And it's not that you shouldn't do it. You absolutely should. But there's always going to be friction trying to put multiple groups of people together, especially when they don't especially like each other, right? So I think that Maggie's going to be going through some of that, and it's just going to be, I mean, who knows if they end up being able to keep this community or not, but even if they do, there's always going to be some growing pains like that. So what I'm thinking here, the reason I'm even talking about this, is that I'm feeling like episodes 2 through 6 are going to be probably about this, about them trying to integrate the people who are coming, trying to save this community, build it up to what they can, and again, who knows whether it works or not. And then 7 and 8, it's going to be something else. It's going to be something different. And that's where we get this other director. That's where we'll probably get the AU episode, I believe. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. Because of that, the next few episodes, which will be 3 through 6, they may not be huge TD episodes, although, we have seen a lot of callbacks and symbolism. So, there might still continue to be foreshadowing. But I'm really looking at the last 2 episodes of the season here as the ones that may be important to us as TDers. But as with all things, we'll just have to wait and see. So thank you for that. Okay. So many videos lately. Thank you for spoiling us. I hope you had a nice vacation. I did. Thank you. There's a bunch of general audience people currently freaking out about the scene from Dead City trailer where Negan and Maggie are apparently drinking together or getting along. There, the GA conclusion seems to be that the two characters drinking together must equal that they come out of it a couple. JDM has already said that there isn't a romantic spark there because they intentionally had him speak about it, and it's not like TWD universe as a whole uses the trope over and over again. We have the Moonshine Shack and nothing else off the top of my head. Am I missing another couple that had a radical relationship shift post mind altering substances? That here you might know. No, not that I'm aware of, or at least nothing comes to mind. And yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head here. I'm not thinking that there's going to be a Maggie Negan relationship. I really think that they've pretty much come right out and said that's not going to happen. So the people who are freaking, I mean, it's no different than the fact that they've said over and over again that Daryl and Carol are not going to be a thing. There's just always going to be people who I don't know if they're just not paying attention. Some of them may not be, but I think a lot of them are, and they just don't believe it, or they just want to get on the internet and rant about it, or whatever. Like we're never going to be able to convince everybody, even when there's really obvious evidence in front of them. But yeah, not only has JDM spoken out about it, but Lauren Cohan in some of their interviews too said, I'm not going to remember what she said, but she basically said they weren't doing it. Like, she said the audience thinks they want that, but they won't. Once it happens, they won't like it anymore. And it's probably the least interesting thing they could do with Maggie and Negan because it would just be like the default, oh, maybe they should have an affair. And it's like, no, their relationship is more complex than that. And, then there's the fact that everyone knows Glenn is her soulmate. So it would be a very surface relationship, even if they did. Anyway, so I do feel like they've come out and said that's not going to happen. The other thing that's interesting, I just have to point this out. I would say that the alcohol consumption is not the part to me that points to romance. I mean, of course, it was pre-romance for Beth and Daryl, and it was. I'm not bashing it. It was a fantastic episode and really interesting and has all the psychology behind it. But that was in that case, it was more about them kind of running from their problems and working through their problems and then being able to face their problems and all of that healing, like I talked about in my still video, had to come before the romance could really take off. Here, I don't know. I mean, she's talking to Negan about the fact that he's hiding out and playing video games. So in that sense, it's similar. But also I didn't feel like now that we've seen this episode, I'm assuming that this part they're talking about was in episode 2 that we just watched, where Negan gives Maggie a drink. It just didn't feel like the same dynamic at all to me as it did in Still. It was, yeah, I mean, she was accusing him of running from, responsibility, but it also just felt like two friends having a drink because he knew that she was frustrated and upset, and he was like, here, have a drink. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't feel at all to me like Still. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is that so many people, and I don't know, I guess if these are the same people who are saying this, but so many people, like the Carolers, reject the idea of Beth and Daryl being romantic. But when they see two other people sharing a drink, they go, oh, that means they're romantic and going to get together. It's like, okay, where's that coming from if you don't believe that Beth and Daryl were romantic, right? I'm seeing a little bit of a hole in your argument here. Anyway, but no, as far as I know, they don't really use this as a trope, and Still was a unique thing, and that's why people liked it so much. So, yeah, no, it's like I said, it's not something that I think is going to happen, and I don't know if people are still saying this. I think this ask was sent in several weeks ago, and I just haven't gotten to it. But I mean, if they're going to freak out about it, let them freak out about it. We'll know by the end of the season that it hasn't happened, just like with Daryl and Carol. I mean, how often have people freaked out about it from one season to the next? And what do you know? Every season of every show and spinoff ends and they are not romantic. So I think it will be the same with Maggie and Negan. Okay. Candy Prankster. Hi, it's been a while. I hope you're enjoying Dead City Season 3 so far. I really am. So I happened upon something very strange when revisiting the Grady arc. I was on Gavin Trevitt's wiki page, the oncologist that Dr. Edwards tricked Beth into killing, working on a theory only to see something new added. For reasons unknown, Eastman is in possession of Gavin's driver's license. And I was like, huh? I went to the episode, Here's Not Here, and we don't even get a shot inside the tin. Went back to the wiki, clicked the reference, and it was linked to the recent auction. They auctioned off Eastman's book, Art of Peace, and his tin of driver's licenses he kept, including the actual driver's licenses they had inside, one of which is Gavin Trevitt. Why does Eastman, who we know lived in Atlanta, have that license? We saw Dawn put put down Trevitt before he could reanimate. So he wasn't a walker that Eastman could find, since we know he used the driver's licenses to make the headstone markers. Both of them were in Atlanta, both worked in Atlanta, but Eastman was a forensic psychiatrist and Trevitt was an oncologist at St. Ignatius Hospital. Here's the link to the auction. You should find him top right, second page of the driver's licenses. Let's take a look here. Okay, it's not, I was going to show, but it's not letting me. It's saying that access is temporarily restricted, so we won't worry about it. Maybe it's nothing, but it feels too much like a coincidence that the prop team did that for something we wouldn't even see. Sunshine Slayer, also known as Obadala on here, said that recently Gimple posted a picture of he and Eastman's actor meeting on a plane recently like it was a coincidence. Sometimes too many things line up for it to be all coincidence. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Yeah, totally agree. This is really weird. And you know what it reminds me of, not because it's the same, but the way it feels kind of like it is the trading cards. Years ago, I mean, it was like during season 8 or something of the, I mean, it was a long time ago. They put out the trading cards that talked about Daryl trying to bury Beth at a white church and how they tried to have a funeral. And then walkers came through. And I remember people messaging me when that came out and they were really upset and saying, is this something that got cut that we haven't seen? Like, did they just rewrite this because they're trying to rewrite Beth's history? And I didn't see it as a bad thing. I did see it as something that happened during the missing 17 days and how important that is. But they are purposefully, but sneakily, I mean, leaking that, right? And most people aren't paying attention to it. But they wouldn't just rewrite something that wasn't the case in the show. And this is stuff that was sanctioned by the powers that be. So I think it has to be real, right? And in this case, it's interesting that they leaked it with in association with the auction. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the person who bought it saw that and put it on the wiki page, or if it would actually be more interesting if they didn't, because it could just be something that, you know, they didn't think much of or didn't care to put it on the wiki page, or if they don't pay very close attention, they might not have even made the connection. If it was a fan that bought it, like they might not remember who Trevitt is. You know, we do because it was part of Beth's arc and that was a big deal. It was a big part of the story at Slabtown. But somebody who isn't a TDer that doesn't pay that close attention to Beth's arc might not even remember who Trevitt is. So it almost seems to me like because they knew it would be sold off, they kind of took the opportunity to slip this in somewhere. And yeah, it's really weird. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how Eastman would have his license. Maybe it was a matter of, because the guy came in really hurt, right? They said he jumped out of the top building or something, which always felt like something that they wanted us to know, but then we didn't see it or see the significance of it. They could have just said, oh, we just found this guy, he's hurt. Or, you know, we ran into this guy and there were walkers after him or something like that. But they said, no, he jumped out of the second story. And I mean, it's just like a very specific thing to say and then not follow up on it, right? So I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of Eastman somehow was there and he assumed this guy died or something. And so, you know, even though he didn't have the body, it just kept the license. And I don't know. Like, I'm sure there's an explanation. But this is really cool because it shows the ties between everything. When the Eastman episode happened, that was in season 6. It was in the midst, it was kind of a side quest in the midst of the Operation Lead the Walkers Away. And of course, that was after Beth had been shot at Grady. It was the next season. But we really felt like Eastman, there were so many parallels and symbolic things that pointed to Beth in the Here's Not Here episode, including the goat Tabitha, who dies at the end. And in the Bible, Tabitha is resurrected by Christ. So there was even a lot of resurrection symbols of a fair maiden who was young, who was named Tabitha. You know what I mean? There was just so many things. And of course, that Morgan is involved in that. So, I mean, even if you think of it that way, if you think of it structurally, you know, I went through and did the Operation Lead the Walkers Away analysis, right? Which I believe is a template of what happened during the missing 17 days. And in the midst of this, we have the Eastman episode. And now we learn that Eastman may have had ties to Beth's arc at Grady. I mean, that's not a coincidence. It couldn't possibly be. So I don't pretend to know how it all lines up and how it all connects, but there is no way that it doesn't. It has to somehow. And now, you know, let's also appreciate the, you know, I'm going to say coincidence in air quotes here, the coincidence that they are, that this has come out, or you found this, I guess. I don't know when it was added, but we're looking at this just before Dead City season 3, which is going to feature Emily as Beth in an AU episode, So yeah, thanks for sending this in, and what a good eye that you got on there and found that. But yeah, that's super exciting. Oh, and then just the fact that Gimple also posted Eastman. That makes me think that this was posted recently, that this was added, to the wiki recently. Like, I don't think there's a very good chance that it's been there for years and, just now you're noticing it. I think it was added recently, and then there was the picture of him and Gimple, and Emily's going to be on Dead City. It's too many things, like you said, that are lining up. So I totally agree, and thank you for sending that in. That's really exciting. I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts on it. Okay, one more by Candy Prankster. Hi, me again. Forgot to add this to my Eastman find. Speaking with some others, but Queen remembered that in Grady, Trevitt had only had his hospital ID, not his driver's license. All we know about him is he fell from a first-floor apartment building, there we go, before arriving to Grady, and he was recognized by Dr. Edwards to be his former colleague. I did a double check, and that is Trevitt's actor, Timothy Scott, in the driver's license. Trevitt was only in Slabtown season 5. Eastman was only in Here's Not Here season 6. Thank you for your time, and so happy to see all your videos on the upcoming episodes. Okay, so yeah, that's, pretty much, I don't have a whole lot to add from that. But again, it's intentional. And think, you don't have to take my word for that. Like, think about the intentionality of taking the actor who played Trevitt, who, like you said, he was not a very big role, but taking a picture of him to create a driver's license and put it in Eastman's tin. Why would they do that if there was no reason to do that? People like to say, oh, it's just attention to detail. No, it's not. It's so much more than that. It's the kind of, they plan these things too well and too far in advance and too specifically. And if they didn't need that for anything, then they wouldn't have done it. And I'm also going to go back to if it was something that they did and scrapped, or even if they, let's just say, play the devil's advocate here and say that they did do it just for attention to detail or something. Well, there's still got to be an explanation for why Eastman had that, right? They're not going to put a detail in that is completely off the wall, bizarre, that means nothing and has no basis in the reality of the plot, right? They're not going to do that. So there's still got to be an explanation for it. But the other thing is, even if they did that, I feel like it's the kind of thing they would have told us. If it was just kind of, oh, we did this for funsies, just as a fun little Easter egg. Why didn't they tell us that on Talking Dead after the show? Why haven't we heard about this before, right? It's because they were specifically trying to hide it until they were ready to leak it. Okay. There's no way that this is all just a coincidence. So anyway, again, thank you for finding that, and very, very interesting. I think that is all the asks I have, so I'm going to call it there for today. I will be back with another video doing YouTube comments in a few days. So let me know what you guys think about all of this. Feel free to send in more asks, whatever you can find, and I'll be back with you in a few days. Thank you. Bye.